This masterclass has been about whiskey, but if you want to explore flavor, there's a lot out there in terms of Canadian spirits that are fascinating on the complexity side, interest side. So if you've gone through all this content and maybe you're just itching for something a bit different, something a bit more, there is more. And I think Canadian spirits are worth exploring. A lot of what's pushed Canadian spirits forward broadly, looking at things like gins and rums and everything, have been small producers. They've done a fantastic job of doing that. And while, in the whiskey category, a lot of the best is dominated by the big producers, not all of it, but a lot of it. On the the other types of spirits side, it's dominated by the small producers. So some really, really fun stuff to explore. I'm going to just kind of go through a few of my favorites. These are not all of my favorites, but there are a few things that are pretty neat that are worth highlighting. First of all, vodka. Vodka is vodka. It's not so much what I'm about. But this is made from milk permeate, which is a byproduct of the dairy industry that they can't do anything with. You can ferment it, turn it into vodka. If you like vodka, like mixing with vodka, it's quite a nice one as far as vodkas go, and quite creamy, believe it or not. But part of it too is it's just fun. It's distilled from milk, so pretty neat. There is a vodka that I actually do like, which is Willowbald. It's a distillery in Ontario. It's part of what I like about it is Ontario rye, corn, and malted barley. So a lot of grains going into this vodka. There's a lot of flavor, and 40%. It's clear. So it's maybe not your traditional vodka that's just really, really clean, but it has some really nice modern elements to it in terms of spiciness, berry notes. So just interesting. It's a bit more progressive. I don't know. Maybe vodka. I shouldn't talk too much about vodka, but anyway, it's from a Jason perspective. From me, I certainly find it's more interesting. You also have some interesting stuff. Acerum. It's produced in Quebec. It's distilled from maple. So they take maple sap, ferment it, distill it. St. Laurent Distillery in Rimouski, Quebec, they make a good example of it. Really interesting. Maple sap obviously comes from maple trees. They draw their nutrients in through the earth. Really, really interesting minerality in some of those spirits. You also have Epic Bottle, but Righand Distillery makes a Brum, which is a beetroot molasses rum. So similar to sugarcane molasses, when you're using sugar beets to make sugar, you get a molasses element, which you can distill. Ferment and then distill. You get a very, very interesting product out of it. Super unique, a beet rum. So worth exploring. Another spirit that's a lot of fun. Confluence, which is a distillery in Alberta, they make an aquavit, which is a Scandinavian white spirit. It's usually flavored with sort of dill and caraway. The one from Confluence is a really nice example. It's a different flavor profile than we're used to. If we think about gin as sort of being a white spirit that has a lot of botanicals in it, aquavit is kind of a different version of that concept. Really good. Caraway is a really, really interesting herb. So I would, highly recommend that as well. Really worth trying. In terms of interesting white spirits, it's hard to top that. In Vancouver, Sons of Vancouver, they make an amaretto, which is made from vanilla beans, honey, and apricot kernels. It's a really, really nice amaretto. They also make one that's barrel aged. Fantastic. And they use awesome barrels from Westland and some other Seattle distilleries, and probably will use other ones as well. They also make some good whiskey. So some in Vancouver. If we move on to gins, there's some awesome gins that are made in Canada. One of my absolute favorites is a citrus gin from St. Laurent Distillery. Once again, is vacuum distilled, which means you're lowering the pressure on your still, which means everything boils at lower temperatures. So if you think about it, if you want citrus characters to come through, think about the character fresh citrus zest, right? Fresh orange, and you compare that to marmalade. You want it to be as close to fresh orange zest and as far away from marmalade as you can, which means a vacuum still, everything's evaporating at lower temperatures, which means you're not cooking stuff as much. So the freshness of the citrus in this gin is absolutely stunning. So just an awesome, awesome gin. One of the best I've ever had. They, speaking of St. Laurent Distillery, they also make a seaweed gin, which is excellent. So there's quite a few gins, so I have a few more. One is Steinhardt Dry Gin from Nova Scotia. The distiller there uses fresh citrus peels, gets them all in, so they're not dried. The freshness and the character and the complexity of this gin is just astounding. Also comes in a really, really nice bottle. So that's, I think, I would say one of the best gins in Canada in terms of a dry gin. They also make a rhubarb gin, which is just really nice. I'm so about a lot of the gin sort of liqueurs or gins that have stuff infused into them. Steinhardt make a really, really good rhubarb gin. So that is also recommended. One of my favorite gins in Canada, another one, is also made by Confluence Distilling in Calgary, Alberta. It is a pink gin. What makes this gin fantastic and really, really intellectually stimulating? Number one, it tastes great, but also usually gin is sort of this balance between juniper and then you have lemon, which is really bright, and somehow you need to bridge the citrus with the woody juniper, and you often do that with coriander or spice. This one, you have grapefruit instead of lemon, which is very different than lemon, and somehow or other the juniper is bridged the grapefruit with chamomile, and it is amazing. It's a wonderful twist on sort of the structure of gin in a way that's still very true to what gin is, but is a twist that is both delicious and intriguing. So I highly recommend their pink gin, especially if if you're familiar with gin. It's just quite intriguing. Continuing on the gin front, we have some aged gins. Aged gins I find often they're not in balance between spirit and oak, but there's a few that I really like. One of them is Black Fox oaked gin. They've amped up the spices in it to kind of fit the barrel, and just a really, really nice, complex barrel-aged spirit that's very different than whiskey. My all-time favorite aged gin, though, is Willowbald, which is an Ontario distillery. You can tell from the color of this, they use new oak. So if you think about how delicate gin is, and they're distilling it in new oak, the distillers love whiskey, and they want to make something that was gin, but something almost towards a whiskey side. So they use new oak. It's fascinating. Really, really strong oak. I have a bit here, and through it, you have punching through that oak. You have these spices, lemon, juniper. It's just fascinating. I've put this one in blind at some whiskey tastings. It obviously isn't whiskey, but tons of people who really like whiskey and don't like gin really like this aged gin. It's 43%. I can't speak highly enough of it. It's something I will always have. Finally, a few rums of note. Last Straw Distillery, they make a blackstrap rum, which is quite nice. There's a distillery in Newfoundland, the Newfoundland Distillery Company. They make a gunpowder and rose rum. It's made with Jamaican rum, so they don't distill the rum. But they add to it wild Newfoundland roses, kelp, charred birch, and sea salt to kind of get a bit of the gunpowder flavor. And it's a bit of an ode to some of the naval history of rum. Really, really intriguing, especially because sulfur is used in a way that's really interesting. Usually you want to avoid sulfur completely. Some of the people at the head of Newfoundland Distilling Company really, really on the ball. Really, really know how flavors work together and how to balance a few simple ingredients together. And finally, my kind of most exciting spirit category are honey rums. So they're spirits that are distilled from honey. There's a few good examples. One of them is Burwood, and they make what they call a single hive. Alberta makes a ton of honey, and they distill it. Really, really complex aged spirits. So if you can ever try an aged honey spirit from any distillery in Canada, you should try it. Really, really good. So worth exploring. Lots of stuff local. Take advantage of it. Try some new stuff. It's a lot of fun.